Yashodanandana Bhajajanandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Sundariyari Jaya Radha Madhava Sundariyari Gopi Jana Bharata Girivardhari Gopi Jana Bharata Girivardhari Yashodhana Yashodhanandana Rajajanarandana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Thank you. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Shri Shri Koditana Shashaki Hosnath Maharaj Ki Kitaralal Ki Chimchange Bhagwan Ki. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. A little tip for the devotees who are setting up for the class is that the devotees who are reading, having these cables like that gets in the way. See? So just put them out on the road. There's plenty of slack on this here. And then that actually completes the service rather than we just do half the job. So the idea is whoever's giving the class, then they can get access to the book without cables hanging all over the place. So I'm just saying that in front of everybody so we all know. Okay, so this chapter is Preaching to America, Part 2, Dallas, July 28, 1975. Swami, why are you here? Asked a reporter at the Dallas Fort Worth, I think it's meant to be Fort Worth Airport. This is my home, said Srila Prabhupada. They replied, delighted to his disciples. I have got so many children and grandchildren, so I have come to see them. Srila Prabhupada had written about Dallas Gurukul in his commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam. The Krishna conscious movement he had written was training a new generation of Vaishnavas in its own school in Dallas, Texas. More than 100 boys and girls were now enrolled, and Srila Prabhupada liked to visit here whenever he toured the United States. Here, as in other ISKCON projects in the US, he involved himself little in the management, But he visited, making himself available to the teachers who were always ready with questions. Since there was no precedent in the West for Krishna conscious education, and since the devotees wanted to develop the school just as Prabhupada desired, they felt they had to ask him about curriculum, teaching methods, hygiene, recreation, and so on. In the 100-degree weather, the schoolboys wore no shirts, and Srila Prabhupada ran the electric fan in his room. As soon as he arrived in his quarters, he asked that all the children and adults come into his room, and one by one they entered the room, held out a hand, and Prabhupada gave them a large rasgulla. That evening, he sat in a rocking chair on the lawn behind the temple while devotees fanned him with a large peacock fan and locusts droned loudly in the trees. He sat there with his disciples amid many thriving tulasi plants, listening to a reading from the Krishna book. This was as much a lesson in how to conduct a Gurukul as were his answers to the teacher's intricate questions. At Gurukul, everything should be based on chanting and hearing about Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 9, entitled The Activities of King Bharat, Text 9. Yatra havava Bhagavan Harirajapi Tatra yanam nijajananam Vatsalena sanita pyata icharupena Yatra, where havava, certainly, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, the Lord, Adya Api, even today, Tatra Tyanam, residing in that place, Nijajananam, for his own devotees, Vatsalyena, by his transcendental affection, Sanidapite, becomes visible, Icharupena, according to the desire of the devotee. At Pulaha Ashram, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari, out of his transcendental affection for his devotee, becomes visible to his devotee, satisfying his devotee's desires. Please repeat. At Pulaha Ashram, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari, out of his transcendental affection for his devotee, becomes visible to his devotee, satisfying his devotee's desires. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The Lord always exists in different transcendental forms, as stated in Brahma Samhita 539. Ramadimurtishu kalani yamena tistanna navataram akarod bhuvaneshu kintu Krishna swayam samabhavad paramapimanyo govindamadi purusham tamam bhajami. The Lord is situated as himself, Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he is accompanied by his expansions like Lord Rama, Baladev, Sankarshan, Narayana, Mahavishnu, and so forth. The devotees worship all these forms according to their liking, and the Lord, out of his affection, represents himself as Archavigraha. He sometimes presents himself personally before the devotee out of reciprocation or affection. The devotee is always fully surrendered to the loving service of the Lord, and the Lord is visible to the devotee according to the devotee's desires. He may be present in the form of Lord Ram, Lord Krishna, Lord Nrsimhadev, and so on. Such is the exchange of love between the Lord and his devotees. Om Agyanatimarandasya Gyananjana Slakaya Chakshurmatamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Akam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Lagayate Giram Yakripatamaham Vande Shri Grim Janataranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. At Pulaha Ashram, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, out of his transcendental affection for his devotee, becomes visible to his devotee, satisfying his devotee's desires. According to the devotee's desire, the Lord will reciprocate. So sometimes the devotee will get to associate with a particular incarnation of the Lord. So in the spiritual world, it's described in the Vedic literatures that it's not just some kind of homogeneous oneness or just light. The light which we see coming from the sun, that's coming from the sun planet. Similarly, this Brahmajyoti, or impersonal light, the light which is actually known as the effulgence of the Lord. In the Ishopanishad, Mantra 15, it's mentioned, Hiranmayena Patrena Satyasya Pehitamikam Tatvam Pushana Pavranu Satyadharmaya Drishtaye. O my Lord, please remove your dazzling effulgence and reveal your true form. So, this dazzling effulgence is known as the Brahman, or the light, or what's the other one? Is it Prakash? So there's many different names people have. And generally the Western concept of philosophy and religion culminates in some impersonal aspect of the absolute truth, because by one's own reasoning, this is as far as you would be able to take it. So there's a philosophy known as naiti. Na means not, iti means thus, not this, not that, not this, not that. So the question which the philosophers ask themselves, is the supreme absolute truth this? No, it's not that, it's not this, it's not that. So by the process of elimination, then they come to understand that either it's nothing, nothingness, or that it's some energy, which is the source of all energy, or some being, which is the source of all beings. So that's as far as they can take it with their own knowledge-acquiring senses and with their own powers of deduction. So these two processes of knowledge acquiring are known as, anybody know one of them? There's three processes of acquiring knowledge.
One is Shabda.
That's the one we're coming to in a minute. Vrinda? Pratyaksha means direct sense perception. So with our direct senses, we can see things. So sometimes people think, I don't believe in it unless I can see it. But we can't see the wind, but we can see the effect of the wind. So we can't see air, but we know it's there, isn't it? It's like someone say, I don't see air, so don't believe in it, and create some conspiracy theory around about it that it's just been invented for some, manipulative purpose or something like that. This is often how conspiracy theories are generated. So we don't see these things, but we know they're there. We can see the effect. So the next one, so pratyaksha is considered the most kind of rudimentary method of acquiring knowledge, where what we perceive is what we understand is through what we perceive, through our senses. So these 5 knowledge acquiring senses are senses of 5 knowledge acquiring senses. Anybody know any of them? You've all got them. Vrinda?
Eyes, ears, nose, touch, and smell.
Yeah, so that's right. Sight with the eyes, smell with the nose. So with your eyes, you can see if something is pleasant, something's dangerous. It's like today it's snowing, so we're using our eyes to see is there some ice there, is there some danger there. So with that knowledge we acquire, we try to avoid the danger. Or smelling as well. If you smell some unusual burning smell, you think, oh, maybe something's on fire, let's check it out. Well, that smells nice. And someone says, get out of the kitchen, it's not offered yet. So with our knowledge acquiring senses, and then sense of touch as well, we can tell if something's hot. And that is there to protect us from just sticking our hand in the fire and then later on realise, no, my hand's on fire, it's melted. So the sense of touch is there. We can experience pain and pleasure through these senses. The sense of hearing also. And sense of taste. Often animals, they will, before they eat something, they'll test it to see if it's safe to eat. You don't see too many animals getting poisoned, unless it's maybe drinking from a poisoned stream or something like that. And in survival courses, they tell you that if you have to survive and you have to eat something, like some kind of bush or herb or something, they tell you touch it to your lips first. If there's no reaction, then put it on your tongue. If there's no reaction, you can chew it in your mouth for so many minutes. And finally, after some people, you have to wait a long period of time each time you do it, and then finally you can determine if it's safe to eat. So in some ways we can acquire knowledge through the senses, but the senses are limited. We can't see what's going on next door. If we look here, we can't see through walls. We may have some kind of fantasy movies where someone's got X-ray vision or something like that. So we can't hear what's going on half a mile away. So our senses are limited. They're limited in so many ways. Even if we get the most powerful telescope, this takes us to the next part. It's called, the next one is, so the first one is Pratyaksha, and the next one sounds like Hanuman. Anumana. So the mind, mana, is Anu means to follow, and mana means the mind. So following the mind means not simply that we just follow the mind's demands, but it's referring specifically to powers of deduction. It's like which is beyond our sense range. We may deduce something like, for example, we're saying we can't see the wind, but we know it's there. We can deduce because the trees are blowing in the wind. And excuse me a second. Sorry about that. It's some deliveries due this morning, and some of these guys start very early. So by our knowledge acquiring senses, we experience a certain amount of knowledge, and then we try to take it further by deduction, by speculation. We can see, as I said, that the wind is blowing the leaves around, blowing the leaves off the trees, etc. So we can see that's there. We can deduce that. But this can also be speculative. It can be wrong when we speculate. Then our speculation is we're trying to make some reason, but sometimes our reasoning can be faulty because we have imperfect senses. And as we were saying earlier on, that the best you could come up with through the process of nati or elimination, process of elimination, is that there is a supreme being, and that supreme being is the source of everything. But you will never come up with the understanding that a supreme being is a person, and that person looks like this. This is the language this person speaks. This person has a boat. They have many other associates. This is what they wear. And so many descriptions are there in the Vedic literatures. So that is called Shabda Brahma. So Brahma means spirit, and Shabda means sound. It means it's receiving knowledge through the medium of transcendental sound vibration. So that means that it's information which is beyond the material world. And we're not talking about some people sitting around a Ouija board and talking to some deceased relative, because whether that's true or not, certainly there's some people who fake that, but that's not the spiritual we're talking about. We're talking about the spiritual, the medium of transcendental or spiritual sound vibration, which is beyond any material, gross material body or subtle material body. It's beyond the range of the gross material senses, beyond the range of the mind, beyond the range of the intelligence. And so that knowledge comes from, it's known as parampara, or Guru Parampara, which means that Krishna, who's known as the source of all knowledge, Eva Veja, by all the Vedas am I to be known. Sometimes that's translated, it is I who am to be known by study of all the Vedas. So the purpose of our study is such. Missed that again. Just stick it on the call. Can't get the call back to square. So the purpose of, sorry for the distractions. Tato Brahma Jigyasa. So this word Brahma refers to the spirit soul. And Tato Brahma Jigyasa. Tato means now at this point in time. Jigyasa comes from Jnana, which means knowledge. It is time to find out knowledge of Brahma, of the spirit. What is the knowledge which pertains to ourself, our real self-interest. So people are concerned with the self-interest related to the body, related to the mind. In the Vedic philosophy, Atma means the self, but sometimes it refers to the self as the body or the mind. But the real Atma is the self which is beyond the temporary body and temporary changing mind. It's that which is unchangeable. And Krishna explains that in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, that the spirit soul is unchangeable, immutable, cannot be killed by any weapon, and is eternally the same. So although our bodies are changing and our mind is changing, that which is not changing is our consciousness, our self. We're experiencing life as a small child, we're witnessing the world about us, and then as an adult, and then as an old person. But still, it's the same us. Now our body changes, our mind changes, our taste changes, so many things change. Our likes and dislikes may change. But the thing which doesn't change is the self in essence. So this Tato Brahma Jigyasa means it's a human form of life. It's the best opportunity to inquire about the higher self, which survives the death of the body and which has a place where it belongs eternally. So Krishna, he comes personally. Sometimes avatar means one who descends. And he descends into the material world to make himself known so that those who are searching for the absolute truth can contact him and get out of this material world once and for all. Chakradeham Punarjan Manati Mamiti Sorjana, the one who knows Krishna's transcendental nature and activities doesn't take birth again in the material world but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna, Krishna says. And so the Lord, sometimes he'll incarnate in many different forms, and sometimes he'll incarnate in the form of sound vibration. Because Krishna is absolute, it means that everything about him is absolute. So his name is not different from him. When we say Krishna, Krishna is present there. And because we don't have the eyes to see it as yet, then we don't take it so seriously at times. But by continuing to practice this, then we actually do begin to experience the presence of Krishna. And the more we engage in devotional service, beginning with hearing and chanting, then the more we can actually experience Krishna's presence. So Srila Prabhupada was very philosophical, he wasn't sentimental. And at the same time, he once asked the devotees the question, how do you know that Krishna is there? How do you know Krishna is God? And then they answered in various ways. They said, well, because you said, they said, well, I could be cheating you. Perhaps I'm just a cheater. And well, it says in the Vedic literature, it says that somebody may have written a book. So what does that prove? Anyone can write a book. I could write a book and say, this is absolute truth, and it says so. Anything different from this is bogus. If you take anything away from this or add anything to it, it's bogus. And anyone could write that. Someone could go to the mountains and carve something on stone and come back and say, this is the word of God. I'm not saying that didn't happen. But people can be cynical about these things. And what other arguments, anybody remember that? Other arguments that devotees put forward? Or reasons that Prabhupada was knocking down each one by one? Does anybody remember anything?
Actually, I want to say one where he says, Doti says, after this, you'll have to, Prabhupada says, I just want to enjoy and not drink wine. And he says, but after this you'll suffer. And he says, well, maybe I will, maybe I won't. But right now I want to enjoy some wine.
Prabhupada was saying, yeah, that's a different one, yeah. So this particular point, it was a room conversation, and Prabhupada was testing the devotees, and they were quoting various Vedic slokas. And he says, yes, you can quote so many slokas, I can quote so many slokas. So what does that prove? So he was training them in all these things in philosophy to understand, well, Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. Brahman is the impersonal aspect, Paramatma is the Lord within the heart, Bhagavan is Supreme Personality of Godhead. He says, yes, very nice story. So he wasn't taking anything they said, and they were, Prabhupada could convince them about Krishna, but he was also testing their knowledge. So of course they come up with so many good answers, and then finally he exhausted all the answers to his question, how do you know Krishna is God? And he says, because we feel it. And Prabhupada wasn't one to go simply by sentimental feelings or fanaticism. So that means it has to be experienced. There's no point in having a philosophy, perfect philosophy with wonderful pastimes and scripture of Krishna, if we can't experience it. Who could do it for very long if it's like living on a hope and a prayer that maybe we'll find out if it's true at the end? That's quite a big gamble, isn't it? You're giving up so many things. You could be enjoying your youth. You could be enjoying your youth. And but you're here surrendered to Krishna, giving up opportunities to enjoy. So we must be getting something out of it. Okay, we might not be rolling around the ground in ecstatic Krishna prema, tears flowing from the eyes incessantly like torrents of rain, and so many other wonderful ecstatic symptoms which we read about in more advanced stages of love of God, where sometimes people can't even speak because their voice is so much choked with emotion, or premanjana, back to the Lochanina, eyes tinged with the salve of love. But sometimes you meet some devotees and you can see that devotee's really got something, and it's not sentimental too, you actually feel liberated in their association. And I remember on many occasions being in association of some very elevated devotees, and they had questions and doubts and things you're going to ask them, but just you go into their presence and then you actually forget all your doubts. You think, I don't even have any doubts, there's no doubt here, there's no problem. Then you go out and after some time you think, I should answer that question. So you have to write it down so that when you're in the presence of them, you can ask the question. There's another instance which is sometimes quoted as one devotee, Prabhupada disciple, he came to visit us once, and we were doing a program in Edinburgh, Namahata program, and he started the kirtan, and he was singing quite out of tune with himself. It wasn't like he was out of tune with everyone else, he was even out of tune. He'd start with one key, and the next part of the mantra would be out of key, and then he'd go back into key, and then he'd go into another one. But the interesting thing was it was consistently like out of tune like that. And my mind was freaking out, going, oh man, can you just sing in tune? Everybody will be freaking out here. It just sounds terrible. So that was my mind coming in, and I thought, oh, don't be offensive, this is a really nice devotee here. He's a great saint. So he was chanting, and he got so absorbed in the chanting that he was chanting for over an hour. And generally at these programs, we chant for 10 minutes, and then we speak for an hour, and then we chant a little bit, and then we take prasad. But he was chanting for over an hour, and he slowly stopped. Actually, before he stopped, then I realised what happened is by his purity, his pure potency, that everyone became so enlivened by this chanting. It was interesting because we hear that the chanting is not dependent on anything material. And this was real proof to me that materially you think it's out of tune, it's out of key, etc. But spiritually it was totally in tune because everyone was becoming ecstatic by it. And it came to the point where I realised, it was just my offensive mind was coming in. And then, because it was so relishable with kirtan, I was thinking actually it would spoil it if you started singing in tune, because to me it was proving how transcendental it was. So we chanted for an hour, and then he stopped, and he says, Prana, what's the program? And I says, that was it. That was the program. He says, normally we chat for a little bit, and then we speak. He said, but I said, that's enough to convince everybody. And then he says, okay, carry on chanting. So devotees like that. One time also I went into the Delhi temple. They were having a Sunday program, and there must have been like 300 devotees in there or something. And they were just chanting. Mostly the program was just chanting all day. Now we can chant all day, but if we're labouring with the holy name, if we're on some mental platform, or if we're putting ourselves in the middle, then the chanting all day is it doesn't have the same effect. It has to be some potent chanting, attentive hearing and chanting. So when I went into the temple, I was just overwhelmed by the atmosphere. It's not like that predetermined in my mind that I'm going to go into the temple and it's going to be like this or anything. I just went into the temple to see the deities, and I was just hit by it thinking, wow, even if the most hardened atheist walked in here, I think he'd be converted. Maybe I'm wrong because I don't think I'm the most hardened atheist, but it was very much encouraging to see that they were putting the emphasis on chanting. And because the chanting was so enthusiastic and pure, and everyone was chanting together with such a loving atmosphere, then it spoke volumes. It meant that the leaders of the temple must be very much respected by devotees, and the devotees are following strictly the leaders of the temple. You see like a very, very close-knit community simply by seeing how the devotees will react to each other in the chanting. So we can feel it. Sometimes we do feel it, sometimes we experience it through prasadam. We take prasadam and we don't feel heavy, we feel light. We feel enlightened. And sometimes through chanting, we experience something nice. First of all, we generally experience some relief from material distress. But Prabhupada says that relief is not positive pleasure. Positive pleasure is something beyond relief. But because Krishna consciousness brings relief as a side benefit, then we do experience that as a type of pleasure. So generally, sense gratification or the senses contacting with the sense objects are simply to bring some kind of relief. So Prabhupada explains it just like they used to have this type of punishment or torture where they would have this device that tie someone to it, and it would be over a river or a pond or something, or a pool of water. They tie someone to it and it would be on a pivot, and then they would dip the person down under the water. They used to have these witch trials. In Scotland, they had them quite severely. It was all over the UK, actually, I think all over Europe. They had these witch trials. And anyway, so what would happen is they would duck them under the water, and then they'd be under the water, holding their breath, struggling, and then when they're brought up, they're gasping for breath. And Prabhupada says, when you come up out of the water, that is not pleasure, that is relief. So similarly, material pleasure, material life is mostly we're under the water struggling, and then a little bit of relief we get through the sense gratification. It says that that is not real pleasure. Real pleasure is something which is positive. So Krishna is known as Rama, which means a reservoir of all pleasure. So by the transcendental nature of Krishna's holy name is such that when we chant these names, we contact the reservoir of pleasure. We contact Krishna, the all-attractive, or Hari, one who takes away all material miseries. So this is the positive aspect of chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And according to the Vedic literature, also it's a recommended process of self-realization. And it's so simple. Prabhupada says it's so simple that even a dog can take part of it, even a child can take part in it. And we sometimes see that we chant to animals and they become peaceful, because the soul is there in the animal body also. Soul is there in the non-moving living entities' bodies. So this way, this prime benediction for humanity at large goes beyond humanity also. It goes to all the living entities, because they're all spirit souls. So this Pulaha ashram, according to the next verse, I'll just finish soon, we can ask some questions or answer any if there's anything. So this Pulaha ashram, which Maharaj Bharat went to, is situated by the Gandaki river. The river Shaligram, the village Shaligram. So for anyone who's visited Nepal, who's been to Nepal here, anybody? You went to Gandaki?
Yeah. No, I think we just went past it. We didn't actually go there.
You went to Pokhara?
Yeah.
So Gandaki, you would have seen there. And also Gandaki comes into Kathmandu. Oh no, that's the Bhagavatam, isn't it? Actually, it's been a long since I've been forgetting. But if you go to Kathmandu and then you take a bus to Pokhara, which is about 8 hours on the bus through these windy, dangerous roads, you get to Pokhara and then you can trek for a few days. And or just southwest of Pokhara is the village of Shaligram, which is on the banks of the Gandaki River. And if you go north of Pokhara, then you'll find many of the, I think 8 of the world's peaks are in that region of Nepal, highest peaks, like Dholagiri, etc. And in that river, Gandaki, many people would go there, even back in the time of Bharat Maharaj, the time of Yudhishthira Maharaj, and I think it was, what's his name? He was Yamaraj before. Vidura. Yeah, so these, typically when devotees would give up being emperors or give up whatever their duties were, they would head to the Himalayas, and many of them would head to the Himalayas in the Gandaki region. So previously it was considered India, or Bharat Varsha was the name of India on account of Maharaj Bharat. Before that it was Elaborata Varsha, and there was another one we heard recently. So, Vrinda, you remember what it was called? Ajanaba, a new one for us. That was what India was called before, or the whole, don't know if that was the whole planet. But there's some evidence there also, because it's considered Nepal's birthplace of Sita Devi. Also there's a place there also they claim that Buddha appeared, Lumbini. And I'm not sure if it still is politically, but it was considered to be the last Hindu kingdom on earth, and it was against the law to kill cows there. If you killed a cow, you would get 30 years in jail. And what's his name? Prem Harina. He's from Nepal. He was saying that, when he was young, he would sometimes see some people getting publicly punished for killing a cow. they used to shame them, they'd take them through the streets, and they'd tie old boots through them. Tie loads of old boots to them, and have to walk through the streets, and everybody knew what they did wrong, and they were shamed, and then were put in jail. So quite a severe sentence, and therefore cow killing wasn't going on. Although the thing is, I don't know if they kill now, but they, as far as I know, they import. But this is typically remnants of the Vedic civilization. The killing of cows is outlawed because the cow is so sacred. People mock this attitude of sacred cow, but they don't consider why is it sacred. It's providing so much. They don't consider it providing. Simple thing, Prabhupada says, the cow provides milk, which is necessary for developing finer tissues in the brain for understanding spiritual subject matter, and it should be taken hot. So it's medicinal in this way. There's so many products coming from the cow without having to kill the cow. Therefore, Goraksha is presented as the Goraksha means cow protection, that the cow is never slaughtered at any time. It becomes part of the family. So in India, sometimes you'll see that still cows just roaming, not as much as used to be, but you can see them just roaming free around the streets, and nobody would harm them. And if they come down the street, you just get out of their way. Coming back to the point is that this this area of Prahlad Ashram, the Gandaki River flows there, and within the Gandaki River we find what is called Shalagram Shilas, or these little stones which we have in our altar, some not so little, some quite big. Tulsinath is one of them. And according to the Vedic literature, we can take these stones and worship them as self-manifesting deities of Vishnu. Now, someone could also say, well, I doubt that. We could just get any stone from anywhere and just say, oh, it's a Shalagram Shila, etc. But if you've ever had the opportunity to do Shalagram Puja, then you know it's not something mundane. It's not just like taking a half brick. I remember I was doing some cultivation program of the Indian congregation in Slough area, and one woman in the shop said, oh, you can worship anything. If I decide I can worship a brick. So this is just unauthorized speculation. Krishna didn't say you can worship a brick. Now in the Krishna book, 10th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna says that we can, or Prabhupada says that we can take these small rocks from Govardhan and worship them directly as Krishna. So when that's authorized, by following the authorized direction of the authorized spiritual master, then Krishna manifests. So whether it be through deity worship, through our chanting, through our service, through our behavior, this is how we're connected, not through speculation, not through our own ideas, but through following Guru Parampara. And this is how we make rapid advancement. When we feel that connection, we feel ecstatic. And sometimes we may limit our connection with the Lord. We may limit our advancement just by hanging on to our own concepts. But if we want to go beyond the range of our senses, beyond the range of our mind, then we make an experiment and put our faith in the Shabda Brahma, put our faith in the spiritual sound vibration which comes in the form of the holy name, which comes in the form of Vani or instruction. So I've mentioned before, but I'll mention again because the example is still relevant, is one time Palindri had given me some service. She was temple commander at one time, and she gave me some service to do. I was doing cooking in the morning for the devotees, and then I was now on book distribution all day. And because the devotees were happy, it was meant to actually just be filling in for one day for somebody, or a couple of days. But for some reason or other, they liked the cooking or something, so they wanted me to cook. But then I was having to cook and do Sankirtan all day, and then fit my rounds in, and I was finding it a bit difficult to manage it all. So after a few days of this, then I went out. So I went to Plymouth and said, why I have to do all the cooking and go out on Sankirtan all day and do the driving? it's why I have to do this. And basically she just said, she said, by following instruction, you're pleasing the devotees, you're pleasing the spiritual master. And when she said that, then I realised I was quite happy to do it. Because I was just concerned with my own challenges in doing that, but she said, you're managing it fine, it's just your mind is getting in the way. And everybody's happy with it, so just continue doing with it. Next thing I get mixed up, there was another story, which was basically, she gave me an instruction, and I says, well, I have difficulty following that instruction. She says, but you haven't tried it. I says, yeah, but I need to see, before I'm going to apply such an instruction, I need to see what's the result of that. She says, you won't see until you do it. She says, just have faith in instruction, do it, and then you'll see this is how it works. She's going to my Krishna. She says, just try it. I said, okay. So I did, because my mind was trying to reason, why am I being asked to do this? It doesn't make sense, etc. Blah blah blah. So she says, just have faith, do it, and you'll see. So I did, and I went back and says, you were right. I couldn't see it because I was just trying to make the reason why it has to be like this, why it has to be like that. But when we put faith in instruction, Krishna can make anything happen. So Krishna is known as Atokshija, beyond the mind, beyond the senses, infallible, beyond the range of the senses, Aparushya. So if we put our faith in Krishna, and his instructions in holy name, and the instructions coming through disciplic succession, then we make advancement. Otherwise what happens is we can cultivate pride, and we can simply remain in our limited concept of things. So to go beyond the concept of our limitations, then we have to put faith in instructions and then follow them. And then see it. Once we put it into practice, then we'll see it. And this is how Krishna reveals himself. He reveals himself when we put faith in instructions, then he reveals himself more and more. And before that, then we're stuck with our own limited concept. Krishna is keen to reveal himself, but this is the test for us. Are we going to put faith in it? And when we put faith in instructions, then we feel it, we experience it. Just like we put faith in an aeroplane, that it's going to get you to the other side. If you don't put your faith in it, if you're too afraid to go on it, you won't experience what it's like to fly in an aeroplane. You just think, oh, it's terrible, I'm not going up there. And everyone else is saying, no, it's fine. It's okay, do it, you'll see. Okay, so we'll just stop there and want to get any questions or comments.
Regarding that last point about, just like the aeroplane example, what is it that causes us to lose our faith even when we've had like confirmation? What is it that brings in lack of faith?
Sometimes it's second nature, so conditioning just comes in. We identify with conditioning since time immemorial. This is called Nitya Bhava, eternally conditioned. Prabhupada explains that we're not actually eternally conditioned, we're eternally liberated. But we identify with our conditioning since such a long time, we can't trace it. So even though Krishna is kindly giving us some experience, sometimes we, due to conditioning, we just slip into our own way again. Sometimes we become too relaxed in our practices as well. Certain things which we did before, which led us to some nice realizations, experiences, we've stopped doing that and we've become lazy. We think, oh, I've arrived at a certain platform now, I can, now that I'm like this, then I can stop doing this. So we have to be resolute in purpose. And if our purpose is not resolute, it means that we've allowed ourselves to become distracted. And if that's the case, then we simply just focus our attention, just refocus our attention. And basically all comes down to japa, attentive japa. Krishna says, wherever the mind wanders, bring it back under the control of the higher self. So if our mind is wandering on japa, it will wander throughout the day. Someone asks us to do something, and we do something, but not as they've asked, because we can't hear what they're saying because our mind's filtering it into something else. So I remember, it's like, it happens almost on a daily basis. You ask somebody to do something, you tell them this is how to do it, and you come back and you do the exact opposite. Or you say, don't do this, and they get mixed up and think, oh, I thought you meant to do this. So hearing is actually the most important thing in Krishna consciousness, is hearing without any filter of the mind getting in the way. Hearing with faith. If we don't have that, then our limitation, we may have some mental prowess, etc., and we may have some ability, maybe organisation ability, some kind of intellectual ability, memory ability, but unless we're hearing and following quite clearly, then our progress in spiritual life will be slow. The good news is we simply just bring our mind back under control again. Wherever it wanders, bring it back. So throughout our japa, we have to keep on attempting to bring it back. And sometimes, just to stay awake in japa is a good japa period for some. And other people seem to be struggling. That struggle might not necessarily mean it's bad japa, it might mean that they're really trying to keep bringing the mind back. But this gets complex because sometimes we try to defeat the mind with the mind, rather than simply as chant the holy name and we hear it. Anything else is not japa. So when we do that, it means then we actually start hearing instructions properly, and we'll know that, oh, this is a good instruction, you should follow this, or this is authorized, so we should do this. And then when we do the authorized instruction, we'll see what's behind it. So that is the process of trusting Shabda Brahma, trusting the sound vibration. So we can be empowered. There's devotees who have been much more empowered than we have and who have fallen by the wayside. So we cannot become relaxed in our practices. And we see the examples of devotees like Sanatana Goswami. At an old age, he was still trying to do his walk to Govardhan, 14 miles, and then Circumambulate, another 14 around Govardhan. And to Krishna, he says, okay, now you don't have to do this. So we do our best, and then Krishna or one of Krishna's representatives will say, okay, for now, then you just do this. And so we put our faith in that, and then that's how we make progress. Anything else? Yeah.
Sometime I was listening to some Prabhupada memories last few days, and these devotees are kind of moved out of the society, but you can see that they did a lot to please Srila Prabhupada, a lot more than I'll ever do in my entire lifetime. So Sri Ramanuja was just giving a seminar on the Shikshastik, and he was saying it's very hard, Ambachari Bhav, it's very hard to see the symptoms in somebody else if you're a Kanishta. It's only if you're at least Majjhima with their knowledge, or preferably who can see. There's 9 qualities. One is doesn't want to waste time. The first one is forgiveness, actually, not being agitated by by the modes of nature. So you may not be able to see those qualities, and you may think, oh, he's not been for Mangalarti, or look at him doing this, then you cast your aspirations. So you have to be really careful. If you're a Kanishta, you don't know really what's going on, If the devotee's in so much service, then best just to be. So it's hard when we're trying to analyze. Oh well, this one was doing well and this one wasn't doing so well. Or I was doing really well then and not doing so well now. It's hard to. It's always good just to be humble anyway and feel that you're unqualified and you're a rascal, but it's hard to be able to discriminate really where the devotees are at.
That's a very good point, actually. It's very dangerous to try to estimate where someone's at. We should be more concerned with where we're at. We've got enough work to do on our own. And we get, it's unfortunate some people choose to criticise devotees not knowing that they actually may be very elevated and we just don't understand it. And this is Srila Rupa Goswami. He warns us against this. In the Nectar of Instruction says that a pure devotee should not be seen, even though he may have some imperfections of his body, etc. And he may appear to have some external bad habits. So because we're not a pure devotee, we can't see. And one of the prime examples is when Gadadhar Pandit went to meet Pundarik Vidyanidhi. Externally it looked like he was a pound, shilling and pence man, as Prabhupada would put it, because he was in an opulent surrounding. But Lord Chaitanya told Gadadhar, you go to this Pundarik Vidyanidhi and you quote these two verses from Srimad Bhagavatam. So when he went there and he quoted the verses, and Pundarik Vidyanidhi actually became so ecstatic, he was like tearing out his clothes and he was in ecstasy, rolling about the floor. Mahaprabhu, don't know if it's Mahaprabhu, but in Krishna Prana. And then it was understood that actually Pundarik Vidyanidhi is Maharaja Vrishabhanu, the father of Radharani. So typically, from the external point of view, external vision, then we may judge someone a certain way, but it's actually very wrong to do that. We have to try to see beyond that, see what that person's intentions are, what their level of devotional service is, etc. And that's not something we can just judge quickly. There was one person who used to reside here, and they expressed to me that they felt that they were more advanced than everybody. And I said, well, how do you come to that conclusion? He said, because I can see all the mistakes everybody's making, I can see all their faults, so I feel like, I'm more intelligent, I'm more advanced. I says, well, according to Lord Chaitanya, you should only see the good in others, so does that not mean that everyone else is more advanced than you? In other words, you're the least advanced because all you can see is the faults. So it was Rabinath Maharaj says that a fly in a field of flowers will find one piece of stool. A honeybee in a field of stool will find one flower and take the nectar. So the choice is ours. They want to be the stool fly or the honeybee. And that's up to us to cultivate ourselves. I think we better stop. Is that okay if we stop now? It's come in the key. Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki,